With the League of Women Voters of Houston, and welcome to Public Affairs Public Access on Houston MediaSource TV. Tonight, we're going to talk about something that affects us all, but we probably don't think much about until this time of the year, and that is our property taxes. And with me today, we have Elizabeth Doss, who's Assistant Chief Deputy of Operations for the Harris County Tax Assessor-Collector. That's Ann Harris Bennett's office, and she'll be talking with us about property taxes and paying them and some other issues that we might be concerned about. We don't really think about property taxes, as I said, much until we get that bill around the first of the year. Elizabeth, how busy is your office this time of the year?
At this time of the year, we really just kind of finished the large push, if you will, of the property tax collection part of the phase where property taxes are due by the January 31st. Of the calendar year. So at this point where we are in the office is basically we've applied every payment that we've received, and what we're doing at this point is going through and determining what property owners maybe didn't get it all paid, and looking to help those people understand payment plans and things like that so we can help them get their payments taken care of.
I guess one of the big questions that people have about property taxes is what do my property taxes pay for? Maybe if I'm a new homeowner or and I haven't had to pay property taxes before, I may not know, where does that money go?
Well, and that is obviously it's a simple but very complex at the same time, because basically you, depending on where you live in Harris County, you have different taxing jurisdictions that your property is within their boundary lines. So for example, everyone lives in Harris County. Some people live in the city of Houston. Some people live in the city of Baytown. Some people live in incorporated Harris County. So at the end of the day, different jurisdictions have different responsibilities they do with their taxes. So for example, obviously people understand that a city does police, fire, all of that information, infrastructure. But at the same time, if you don't live in a city, you are paying a water district for your water and sewage, and you're paying an emergency service district for your ambulance and fire. But at the end of the day, all of those jurisdictions are tasked with the general, road and bridge, public safety, medical, the things that we use every day, the roads, the infrastructure, and that's kind of the big, large umbrella of what most of the taxing jurisdictions do with their property tax values and property taxes.
Pays for everything in the county and in the city. I guess school districts as well. So you really cover a lot of territory in your tax bill. How does somebody read their tax bill? How do they know what they're paying to? Does it just go into a big pile and you distribute it?
So here at Ms. Bennett's office, we're the Harris County Tax Office, and we are one of 26 different tax assessors within Harris County. So each taxing jurisdiction, they contract with a tax assessor. Everybody gets a bill generally from Ms. Bennett's office because we collect for Harris County. Everybody's in Harris County. And we also collect for City of Houston, Houston Community College, and Houston ISD. So a large portion of property owners in Harris County only receive a tax bill from Ms. Bennett's office. However, there are, 19 other school districts that we don't collect for. So if you're in Cy-Fair, you're in Pasadena, those other school districts have their own tax office. So generally all of our bills have general formats that are required. We have to have the values, the dollar amounts, the tax rates. However, when you're looking at a tax bill like from ours or other taxing jurisdictions that are consolidated together, there will be a line item for each taxing jurisdiction on how much exemptions they offer that you've been applied and granted, and what's their tax rate and what the bill is by each jurisdiction. And that's a requirement. So everybody's tax bill has that same data on it. It's in a little bit different format depending on the tax assessor's office.
So in other words, don't just look for, in some areas, don't just look for one tax bill.
Absolutely, because if you don't live in a city, you are absolutely going to get probably a school bill. and a water or a freshwater district or a mud tax bill. And, those are the kinds of things when we talk to property owners, especially new property owners, is to make sure you're getting a tax bill from every tax office you need to. And a lot of that is starting with the appraisal district side, where they list by your property address of what taxing jurisdictions, are in that boundaries where your property is.
So it's helpful to keep up. I mean, I guess the benefit of living inside of Houston proper is that it's all going to come in one bill from your office, and it'll be due at the same date. But if there are other jurisdictions that you're paying into, those dates and the times that you get them and the times they're due might all be different, right?
And they could be, but generally in the property tax world, property taxes are always due by January 31st. But there's always a if and that's generally as if you protested your values and maybe your value is delayed in certifying to each taxing jurisdiction. And it is depending on when they're able to get their bills in the mail, because in the code section, everybody has that whole month to pay once that bill goes out. So that kind of gives you some idea where they could fluctuate slightly.
Now you're talking about the code, and much of what I've heard you say is, the code does this and the code does this, and so it's important that everybody understands that you're regulated by the laws of the state and the county, right?
Absolutely. All tax assessor collectors here in Texas are regulated by the property tax code. That is, a living, breathing document that the legislature every 2 years does make changes to. So that happens. So that is something that we all have to follow those tax codes, and we're legally bound to do so.
Okay, so let me ask you a question about the taxes themselves. I get my bill in the mail, I open it up and I look. How did they come up with that number? I might be wondering. Is that your office that does that?
Well, it's a part of our office, and that's a lot when we do a lot of property tax workshops in the communities that we partner with the Harris County Appraisal District. And a lot of people don't understand the difference between their office and our office, but its basic property calendar, if you will, is the appraisal district charged with appraising your property at market value as of January 1. They also are required to review your applications for exemptions and prove them, and keep your property records, like who owns, the property, who sold the property, et cetera. All that is working at the appraisal district. Once they're finished with all of those values, that's when the values then go to the taxing jurisdictions, and they calculate tax rate. So we go from the appraisal district to the jurisdictions themselves to calculate a tax rate. And then the tax office then gets the value times a rate equals your bill. And that's the part of the tax office, what we do, a part of the calendar. Again, the appraisal districts appraise. Each taxing jurisdiction sets the tax rate, and then we take that value times the rate equals your bill.
So I guess something that voters should be aware of is that whenever we vote for a bond or improvements of some sort, a lot of times, is that going to carry into that value, that rate that you're talking about?
Very much so. As each taxing jurisdictions will go out for bonds, and of course, voters get to approve yes or no. And once that is approved, those values will increase, not values, but the tax rate will increase to be able to pay for that bond. So a part of a tax rate is the general revenue side that manages the day-to-day tasks of the taxing jurisdiction. The other part of that rate is the debt service rate. And that's the rate that's pledged by taxes to make those bond payments. And obviously, as values go up, rates go down. So somewhat your debt rate can go down if values go up. But obviously, if you're going out for a bond, more than likely that debt rate will increase. And generally, the taxing jurisdiction understands or can give you estimates of how much that would go up.
Let me ask you a question now. You're doing all these workshops, maybe not you personally, but your office is doing all of these workshops around town. I think you started in late March. Right, and you're going on through May on property tax workshops. Tell us a little bit about what those are, why I should go to those, why I might be interested in those.
Okay, no problem. And we do them, generally in the spring and the fall. In the fall, we generally work on homestead exemptions with the appraisal district side. And then our group would be, hey, your tax bills are coming in the mail. But now that we're in the spring time, we are really focusing a lot of those workshops on those value notices have come out for 2021. Property owners are looking at those values and wanting to know how to protest those values. So a lot of our workshops this time of year are dedicated to how do I protest those values, because the appraisal district always partners with us. And then our end of the office is what, of course, we're doing this time of year is helping property owners who haven't got their property tax paid and helping them get into a payment plan. Our workshops are on our website at the www.hctax.net under workshops. There are monthly workshops and there are workshops coming on every day. During the COVID, all of our workshops are on Zoom. So a lot of Avenue CDC, the AMOS, there's lots of different organizations that have helped us get some of these workshops up and running. So if you just want to take a look at our website and see when they're coming out and see when you can register for those workshops.
It's really interesting and helpful maybe that here you are a tax collection agency for the state, for the county, and yet you're running these workshops on how citizens can question or challenge, or if they have issues, they can bring them up. So you're not just sending out this letter saying, hey, pay this, don't ask any questions, just, sign the check. You're actually trying to help people. How many people come to the workshops normally?
Absolutely. We had a workshop last night with the Avenue CDC and we had almost 100 people in attendance. And generally, a lot of our workshops are in the 80s and 90s, especially with the Zoom, because it's more convenient. Where when we were having workshops throughout the county, maybe we'd have 50 or 60 people attending, depending, if they could get there after work or we had them during the day. So actually the Zoom has helped some of the attendance, but our goal, Miss Bennett's goal is very much is, her constitutional duty is to collect these taxes. But at the same time, she wants everybody to understand that there are exemptions that could limit your tax bill. There's ways to get those tax bills paid when you're having problems. And that's very much a part of what we do here at the Harris County Tax Office. And the same with the Harris County Appraisal District. They will admit, they're appraising 1.7 million accounts. They can get things wrong. And that's what that protest is there, is for you to go and meet with them and go, okay, this is why my property is not worth this value. And you have that, that conversation with them. And that's very much what we do here in Harris County, is try to help property owners really pay only what they need to pay.
So to be clear, if somebody is protesting their the amount that they're owed, the question is for the appraisal district rather than your office. Is that correct?
That's correct. So if you want to protest your values, that is the Harris County Appraisal District. And their website is the hcad.org. And I'll send you that information just so you can have it. But that's very much where property owners start their protesting. They got those notices, or they're coming out now. You may not have received yours, but they're coming out this month and next month, where it's a green notice of value and it has all the information on how to protest. And that is at the appraisal district side. I just wanted to take that opportunity to let you guys know, because the time on the protesting is here and now, because that protest deadline is May 15th.
So they would start there. Now, say that I've had a problem. I didn't like what I was being charged. And I took it up with HCAD. We started the thing there, or maybe I went to one of the workshops that you hold together and started the process, learned about it and started it. But now, now it's time to pay the piper, and I've got the amount that I've got to pay. I've got to come to your office, but look, we've had a heck of a year this past year. Maybe I've been out of work. Maybe something else has happened. What are my options? What happens if I don't pay?
So right now, and that's kind of where we are, is, they were due. And now in the tax code, unfortunately, if you don't pay them timely, you have penalty and interest that'll accrue onto that property. So it's very important, if you're a property owner, especially of a homestead exemption, that you contact the taxing jurisdictions and reach out to them for a payment plan, because what that offers into the tax code is it allows you to get into a payment plans and possibly reduce those accruing of the penalty and interest in the future that would help limit your tax liability. Because at the end of the day, unfortunately, taxes are going to be due. During the pandemic, we've been trying to do the best we can, within the code to let everyone, have a payment plan just so you know how much you can get in. We've also have extended payment plans where normally we would have been at 12 months. And Ms. Bennett pretty much said it's maximum we can go. If someone needs up to 36 months for payment plan, that's what we're offering, because we know during a pandemic, people are out of work and need help getting their payments taken care of.
That's great news, but I know there's other exemptions, or I've heard there's other exemptions. What other just normal run-of-the-mill every year exemptions does your office handle and see, and what can you do for various tax?
Sure. So very much, if you are a homeowner, you lived in that house on January 1, even if you have a mortgage, you own that property, the deed's in your name, and you generally can apply for and will be granted a general homestead exemption. A lot of the local entities here have adopted that up to a 20% local exemption. Harris County, City of Houston, HISD, they all have that, where we're taking your market value and removing those exemptions. So 20% of that value could come off if you've been granted that exemption, that local option homestead exemption, which reduces your tax bill. It reduces that value that then we're multiplying times the tax rate. So it's important to know, to make sure if you are living in a home, that you can reach out to the appraisal district to apply for that homestead exemption. There's lots of different type of homestead exemptions. The general one is just, a lot of people, can apply for that. There's over 65. And when it comes over 65, there's their surviving spouse of over 65, there's disabled, there's veteran disabilities. There's also lots of different ones in recent legislation where the legislatures want to reach out to, if you have a spouse that's a fallen police officer or a fallen EMS and fallen military, there are homestead exemptions for those also. So there are so many that we could have a whole hour workshop on just the different type of exemptions that the property owners can have in Texas, that it is really best to kind of start at the appraisal district website or even our website. We have those listed to see what you may qualify for. So it's important to know to check your tax bill, look at our website to make sure if you think you have a homestead exemption, make sure you have one. Because if you don't, we need to make sure to help you reapply for that one. And the one about applying is we can actually go back a tax year or two, depending on the type of the year. And if you've overpaid, then you can have that refund if that exemption comes in. So it's important to know the exemption types.
So really, as a taxpayer, as a property owner, I need to educate myself about what exemptions are out there and ask about, because I guess it's really incumbent upon me to take that first step. Your office can't do that proactively because of all the various exemptions, right?
Well, and what we do, what we have is what we can put on our tax bill. And if anybody gets a tax bill from our office, you flip to the back of it and it lists, all kinds of different general ones. We have tax inserts on how to make payments and different type of payment plans. But the appraisal district does send out that notice of appraised value. And there's lots of information on that about your particular property where it'll show if you have a homestead or not. There is lots of information that come in the mail. Unfortunately, some people's tax bill goes to their mortgage company, and they may not see that. And so we always let people know your tax bills are on websites. So you're, happy to have it then. If you want a copy of it, you can request it via email. If you can't pull it off the website. And I think that's important as property owners, is there's only so much that the taxing units can send to you, that it is a quick answer to quick look at a website and see what else is out there. So
it does help to go onto the website to to check on your I think all you have to do is enter your address, correct?
Address, name, or account number.
Okay. And then we can see what the taxes are, what they were appraised at this year, when they're due, and that information. And so that's a good place maybe to start. You're right. I pay a mortgage, and so the mortgage company gets it, and they just let me know every year, that they paid it. And I guess they're not looking into all that information. They don't know if, I have a deceased spouse or if I'm over 65, I guess they might know that. But that's really, again, back upon me as the property owner, as the taxpayer, to kind of look in and see what my options are and be proactive about it.
Yes, very much.
Okay, so let's say that we get to the point where I do have to pay, but again, maybe because of COVID, maybe because of a disability or some other problem, I'm going to need more time to pay. And I know you mentioned something about that. Can you go into some detail about what my options are?
Sure. In the property code, and what Ms. Bennett has, done as much as we can within the taxi code, is allow the payment plan options. There are sort of two rules on payment plans. One's for homestead exemptions. If you live and own there, the legislature has allowed you to have a different homestead exemption rate. And then there's the other properties that we do allow into payment plans, and definitely they have different, rates of penalty and interest. However, both of them at the end of the day will save property owners additional penalties. And it's important to get into a payment plan before what the tax code says turn over to the delinquent attorneys. So property owners have from today, up until before July 1, to get into one of these payment plan options, where then you are then making your monthly payments. And we have terms from 12 months up to 36 months. So once you're into that payment plan, you start making monthly payments. And it helps a property owner know, okay, I can afford this for the 12 months. I know when it gets done, it helps me get there. Or, if those dollar amounts are just too much at 12 months, we can go to 24, 36, to kind of help property owners get that, the prior year taken care of. But at the same time, you have to be aware that another year is coming. So that's kind of what we always try to help people understand. And property tax code it's an every year. But those payment plans will basically reduce those additional penalties that accrue later in the tax calendar. And that's kind of why time is of essence with property taxes. It's important to understand if you're having problem paying. To, our website, our email address, our phone numbers can all get you into a payment plan for your property.
In my neighborhood recently, or somewhere in the neighborhood, people were complaining or had noticed that there was a person who was, I guess, what we might call squatting in an abandoned home. And, they were talking, I think they sent a letter to Ms. Bennett's office about, claiming to be from some kingdom and have eminent domain over the property. But it goes back to this old idea of squatters, people coming in. Can anybody pay my taxes for me, look this up, pay them for me, and then claim, oh, well, we're paying taxes on property, so it's our property?
Absolutely not. Nowhere in Texas law allows that to happen in Texas. You can pay someone else's property tax, obviously, but that doesn't give you any right to the ownership of that property. The only ownership change in Texas of properties, if you deed that property to someone, or in the Texas tax code, if you don't pay your property taxes or are unwilling to get into a payment plan, and at some point there could be a judgment taken and, that property is sold for property taxes. And at that point, the property taxes are paid and then the deed would change over to a new property owner. But that's in extreme cases where most people are able to make their property tax payments in some kind of payment arrangement, before that happens. So if you have a property that, is delinquent in your neighborhood per se, I am sure it's in some form of, trying to get those collections activities from the property owner. And even if a property owner at some point is unwilling to make those payments, that's when at the end of the day, the taxing jurisdictions will file suit against that property owner and begin that delinquent collection activity where the courts are involved, to help get that payment taken care of before tax sale is involved.
So it sounds like what I hear you saying is that the role of the tax assessor collector's office is to get people to pay and to help them if they are, because you don't want it to go and just keep mounting up and piling up. You want them to resolve the issue so they don't have to worry about their property.
Absolutely. And that's always been our goal here is the minute there's a balance due, you are getting notices from our office saying, hey, can we help you with the payment plan? Here's your exemption options. If you're over 65, there are other over 65 things called tax deferrals. There are lots of things out there that can help property owners. It's just, the information is there and we're sending it. It's just getting people to understand that, generally when you're having difficulties, it's hard for them to reach out. But at the end of the day, we are here to help them, get those taxes taken care of, because the one thing about property taxes is, they're not going to go away, and it's important to get ahead of them and get some help.
So the thing is they should not be afraid to contact you.
Oh gosh, no, we're very much open to helping people. And that's what we do every day is how can we help you get those taxes paid? By statutory requirement, we have to collect them for the jurisdictions, but at the end of the day, it's our purpose to help you get those taken care of, especially for the property owner, because the longer it's outstanding, the more they pay. And we all understand that because we're property owners ourselves, and we don't want to have other people have to pay, more when it's not necessary.
So another question about COVID right now, and say like I do get my property tax in and I want to get some more information. I can zoom into one of those workshops that you and HCAT are doing. But what about coming down to your office down on Main Street? Is that something that's viable at this point?
Yes, our branches have been open since last year by appointment only because we were doing the COVID protocols. We're still following those protocols. So we are requiring appointments for some type of properties. Taxes, generally with property taxes, emailing us, giving us a call. Most property taxes can be paid online. If you have questions about your property tax, we are doing phones, in person, or a Zoom. We Zoom with customers too, because there are some customers aren't comfortable with coming to our branches. But very much as our branches are open, generally it's best to make an appointment just to make sure, what you're needing can get done in a timely manner, because we do have those safety protocols. And, we don't have people standing all over each other, obviously, so it's best to kind of reach out to us to see what branch has less people sitting at it at that point that can help you. We have branches all over Harris County, so there isn't a need for you to come downtown necessarily. Our goal is to be able to help you, through our website, our phone, emails, or even if we have to do a Zoom with customers, we're doing those also.
Okay, so any other changes that we need to be aware of, anything coming down in the next year or later on this year that we should be put on the calendar?
Well, the legislation is in session right now. And as of today, there hasn't been any sweeping property tax changes, but it's early in the season. So it's to be determined what changes there could be in the property tax code. Generally, there are slight ones from session to session. Last session, we did have a new exemption type that came out, and it was an heirship exemption, where that's probably helpful to a lot of property owners when, your parents passed away and there's several of you own it and you're in the probate, and that there is an opportunity for one of them to have an exemption on that property until that probate is completed. So every session there is something new. So I would just say right now, stay tuned for the 2021 tax year. For sure, the one thing we can talk about, because 2020 we're in it, even though those tax bills won't come out until the fall, is there is going to be a payment plan option for those of you that have had doing from the winter storm. If you had property damage, we do have a payment plan for the 2021 tax year, which will be those bills that come out in the fall, that will allow you to pay your property taxes in 4 equal installments. And that information will come along with your 2021 tax bill. But that's something for a future tax bill that's coming in the fall, not ones that are due now.
Okay. One question I want to go back to about homeowners exemption. Well, one clarification, that's only for one property, right? If my dad, my parents left me some property, and maybe I bought a home on a lake for retirement or whatever. My homestead exemption is just on the home I'm living in now, correct?
Correct. So when you make an application for a homestead exemption in any county in Texas, is your driver's license has to be tied to that property. That has to be you're swearing that is your primary address. Your address has to match to your driver's license. So they are very much, you're only allowed to have one homestead exemption property. It's your primary address is where that exemption should be. No, on the heir property, like HEIR heir, is if your parents passed away and you or one of your siblings, if you will, moved into the property. Before, you weren't able to have a homestead exemption because you didn't own that property because the deed's not in your name. Right now, it's in the middle of probate and things like that. But what the legislature has come out to allow is when there is one of those heir to the property that is living in the home, they are allowed to have that heir application for that homestead exemption, even though they aren't 100% owner, but they are 100% living in the property.
If my parents both pass and they have in the county that they live in, they have that 65 and over exemption. Once I get this, and this really maybe not be your office, but it could be that once they pass away and that the property comes to me, I'm not getting that exemption anymore. Is that correct?
So what generally happens in the property tax code, it's sort of a requirement of a property owner to inform the appraisal district of that county or wherever that property is that the homeowner has passed away. The over 65 exemption stays on for the entire year that person has passed away, but then will come off the next tax year. So you sort of have to understand and be prepared that if your parents have lived there for a very long period of time, the property taxes could be very low because of something called a tax ceiling for that school district that has kept them paying lower value on that property for the school bill. And then a lot of jurisdictions have high exemptions for over 65, which would considerably reduce the tax bill. So it's something to understand is when your parents do pass away, it's best to go ahead and let the appraisal district know, because at some point they will find out, because you don't want to leave that exemption on for several years and you pay those taxes at a lower cost. And then that exemption comes off because the appraisal district will go back off and can remove that exemption back from when your parents passed away. So it's important to, once ownership of a property changes, it's best at that point to reach out to the appraisal district of that county, let them know what's happened, and then they can give you advice on what's next. What is the next part? Is there any other exemption you could be granted on, like an heir property exemption or anything like that? But it's important to inform the central appraisal district of that ownership change when it happens. And generally, most of those, like Harris County Appraisal District, has exemption forms and correction applications and things like that on their website, where it's a form. You just fill out the name, address, my parents have passed away, and you mail it in. Or to some degree, some of the appraisal districts like Harris sends out notice cards. And if those cards get returned because they don't get forwarded, then they know there's been some ownership change, or they suspect that. So some of that stuff happens, depending on where it is in Texas.
Okay. Are there any questions that I've missed that I didn't ask that you normally get a lot from customers or taxpayers that I'm not even thinking about?
Generally, in our workshops, we do a little more questions about over 65 and disabled. We briefly talked about their exemptions and the higher values that some of the jurisdictions allow on those exemptions, but we really didn't go into what we call as a tax limitation and a tax freeze, is what some people call it. But basically in Texas, the legislature has mandated that school tax, which is the highest part of your tax bill generally, gets frozen, if you will, is the word they use, is the slang term, if you will. Basically how that works is the year you turn over 65 and you made application for your exemptions, and all of those exemptions come in, and the tax assessor then it calculates your school bill. So for example, my HISD bill was $1,000. Now, no matter what, the value goes up or the tax rate goes up, I'm never going to pay more than $1,000 to that property unless, I'm building a swimming pool or adding on. But if I'm just maintaining that property, it's only going to say $1,000. And that's important when you go into that fixed income period of your life where you need to know, a good understanding of how your tax bills are going to look for 10 or 20 years. And that largest part of your tax bill will freeze and it'll stay in that way. And the only thing, that could go up and down is your other school district, not other school district, your other county or cities who generally offer a higher over 65 exemption. And that, it's a lower part of your tax bill and it helps you maintain your property and pay those tax bills. The other part that goes along with all this over 65 is there's something in the tax code called a tax deferral. And what that deferral is, and we sort of explain it like an insurance policy, where go ahead and apply for a tax deferral when you're doing exemption. You don't ever have to use it. You can always pay your taxes. What a tax deferral is there for is if for some reason you miss paying on time or you don't have the ability to pay your taxes. Because what that tax deferral does is it charges only a 5% higher tax year of interest. That's it. There's no penalty. There's no collection fees or anything like that. So it basically helps out property owners. If they have to make a decision as do I pay groceries, do I pay my tax bill, it'll allow them to continue to stay in their house as long as they want to and not pay their tax bills for a very low interest per year. It's not compounded and it helps property owners stay in that property until they, they're ready to sell it or they pass away and then the taxes get taken care of at that point. But the other part of it is it also helps you as if you just pay late. What if you were in the hospital, heaven forsake, or you were on vacation and you forgot to pay your tax bill on January 31st? Well, on February 1 in the tax code, it's 7% on day one. Well, if you have a tax deferral, it's 5% for the entire year. So it's just a tiny little amount you would have to pay when you remember to pay in February. So it's important to know when you turn over 65, you need to fill out an application for your homestead exemption. But also at the same time, I would request, and it's a good idea to go ahead and fill out that tax deferral form at the same time, just in case you need to use it. And those are the kinds of things we talk about when it's an over 65 disabled property owner or going to be over 65, just to you understand that's out there and it can help you with your property tax payments.
So have you seen a lot of COVID and freeze related questions yet, or is that to come?
We are been getting a lot of COVID questions. Unfortunately, there's nothing in the tax code that allows for any kind of break or reduction because of COVID. Unfortunately, they haven't made any rules like that in the legislature. All we're really able to offer is those payment plans. And it really does help a lot of property owners who aren't able to make those payments get control of what those payments can be like in the future. And on from the freeze, we haven't got a lot of them, but the ones who, because they're just kind of getting into, that insurance and things like that. But that freeze, it's called a disaster payment plan. The disaster is in 2021, which those tax bills won't go out until the fall. So it really won't help you until that bill you get in October, November of this year, that you would then need to make a payment before January 31 of 2022. But it's coming in the fall and that information will be in our tax bills in case you're still dealing with, your house, and insurance and things like that in the fall, that opportunity will be there for you for 2021 tax year.
Well, Elizabeth Doss, I want to thank you so much for your answers. Very good information. Always learning a lot from people like you who are willing to share that information.
Thank you for having us and let us know at any time we can come back. We'd happy to help property owners here in Harris County.
That was Elizabeth Doss, the Assistant Chief Deputy of Operations for the Office of Ann Harris Bennett, the Harris County Tax Assessor-Collector. We want to thank her for her information today, as I mentioned earlier. Also want to remind you that if you're needing help from the Tax Assessor-Collector's Office, help is available in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Chinese, so they can help you out there. We learned a few weeks ago that Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo accepted a position in Miami, and he'll be leaving Houston. Mayor Sylvester Turner named Executive Assistant Chief Troy Fenner to head HPD, and City Council accepted that recommendation this past week. Fenner will become the new chief this month in April. Tonight, we're going to go to the vault and look at a show that was originally broadcast August the 1st of 2019. Our guests were incoming HPD Chief Troy Fenner, as well as Paul Cordova, the Chief of HISD Police at the time. Now he's with Aldine ISD. And also Lieutenant Fred Varela, who was with the University of Houston before he retired, University of Houston downtown, and now he's retired. We talked about what it was like being a policeman, why they wanted to become policemen, and their attitudes on policing. So we're going to take this show from the archives to learn a little bit more about incoming Chief of Police Troy Fenner. As a reminder, this show was originally recorded in August of 2019, so call-in numbers will not work at this time. With me tonight, let me introduce our special guests. On my left, we have Houston Police Department Executive Assistant Chief Troy Fenner. To get things started, we're going to talk about police work in Houston, and let's talk a little bit about each of who you are, because a lot of times people may not know. Chief?
All right. Born and raised here in Houston, very proudly. Born in 5th Ward, raised in Hiram Clark, graduated from Madison High School, undergrad work at Sam Houston State University, and a master's degree at the University of Houston, Clear Lake. November will complete 30 years for service with the Houston Police Department. It's the only agency I've worked for, and it's been extremely enjoyable. All the way up from an officer to my current position. Just really, really proud of our city, proud of our agency, and proud of the partnerships that we have with the other agencies here. So,
what made you want to be a police officer?
Well, I come from a family of 6 kids in a very small home, okay? It was 3 of us to a bedroom, and we couldn't use mom and dad's bathroom, so I needed a job. But seriously, I was really good at math when I came out and I went to school, and I thought I would take something in finance or accounting, but I was just so bored. And I think in my second year, I took a criminal justice course, and it really piqued my interest. I didn't know police officers. I'm a first generation police officer in my family, but it really piqued my interest, and I always had a burning desire to help people. And when I found out, really that's what police work was. So I took an interest and just started taking the criminal justice classes, and finished up in Sam Houston. And a few months after I graduated, I was in the academy with Houston PD.
You know, most of the time people have experience, and we were just talking about this, most of the time people have experience with the police officers. It's either one of 2 things: you need them or you're in trouble, right? It's these kind of two, and so a lot of times I think in the community we have some misunderstandings about police officers, police work, and our interactions with them. A few years ago, State Senator John Whitmire, the Dean of the Senate, had talked about introducing legislation to teach students about how to interact with police officers. And this was kind of in response to some of the concerns that community activists and other people have about police officers and bad interactions with them. State Representative Thompson, Symphronia Thompson here, introduced a bill to prevent police from arresting people for fine-only crimes. And so again, it's this idea that maybe people don't know how to deal with police officers when we encounter them. Again, it's either a situation where we're in danger, we're in trouble, and so we need them, but other times we don't seem to like them, right? We complain about police officers overreaching or exceeding their authority. So what is the job of a police officer as you see it?
Well, it's to make your community safe and make your community better, building relationships. And generally, we talk about community service and community-oriented policing. Well, what does all that mean? It means, like Chief Officer Bader always says, relational policing. Every contact is an opportunity to build a positive relationship, but we understand that police work too has the other aspect of it, of enforcement. And sometimes when you're enforcing a law and you're arresting someone when they're doing bad, sometimes it does not look good. and people have to understand that. But what I would like police officers to do and the general public, you know, if we just listen to one another, communicate a little bit better, we try to always get our officers to slow down. A lot of time is on your side. Don't rush. Just talk to a person and be respectful. Treat people the way that you know you want to be treated and the way that they want to be treated. And sometimes just by that, it diffuses things. And we know that there's a lot of perceptions out there. And there's perception and there's reality, okay? But guess what a person's perception is? It's their reality. So it's just trying to talk to people, slow down, and get them to understand what we're doing, what we're trying to do, and how we can get out of this situation and get them home safely, and the officer can get home safely.
When we meet an officer in his or her official capacity, what is the most important thing to remember to do?
When you say meet, is it like on a call for service, a traffic stop, or just in general? Because if it's just in general, the most important thing is to realize we are people, just as you are. And I know we wear the badge, and you see the gun and the handcuffs and all our other equipment, but we are people just as, and we want to be treated, you know, as a person. And sometimes people look at, oh, that's a police officer over there. It's no different. We're human beings, and just know that the great majority of over 800,000 officers in our nation, 18,000 agencies, the great majority of them are great people that just want to help, you know, and so just allow them to help, and that's it, you know. And if it comes to a place where it's an official business, it's a traffic stop or whatnot, just listen and don't prejudge. Just as we tell the officers, don't prejudge people, you know, just slow it down, try to communicate, try to get some understanding of what's going on, and just settle it down and de-escalate. And de-escalation it's on both sides, okay? If the officer is escalating, definitely we don't want that, okay? But sometimes we see the citizens escalating things as well. So remember, the goal is just to get through whatever the traffic stop or the communication or whatnot, and let's get everybody home. And that's the goal. And when you look at it that way, a lot of times, especially with the younger generation, the teenagers and young adults, the conflict comes. You know, if somebody gets upset, well, he or she disrespected me or whatever happened, okay, there's a ways and proper way to take care of that. You know, don't try to address it out on the traffic stop or doing an investigation. Somebody's mistreating you or whatnot. Get home, get with your parents or an adult, get on up to the nearest police station and file a complaint. And that's how we want to do it. And we'll take care of things on the back end administratively. Sometimes it goes as high as somebody getting terminated or getting disciplined or whatnot, but we're going to hold everybody accountable. And I think you'll hear that from any chief, any commander, any lieutenant in our prospective area.
Right.
When I was a kid, now I grew up in a smaller town, and so we knew the police officers, you know, and sometimes I don't think they were paid very well because sometimes they had other jobs, and policing was, they were policemen part-time, and so you might see them somewhere else and then in uniform. So it was a different idea, but I also grew up at a time, and I was telling you the stories that when I was a little kid in the 70s in elementary school, they were signing stuff. The teacher, you know, my mom was taking me through the registration thing, and the teacher says, oh, here, sign this paper. And, well, what is it? So, well, this is in case he gets into trouble, do we have permission to paddle him?
Yes.
And the response was, oh, yeah, and then let us know and we'll finish it at home. So it was different times, right?
Yeah, different times.
But, you know, it was this idea that, you know, the phrase, it takes a village. It seemed like in where I grew up, in Central Texas, it was a smaller town, but there was a lot more trust and interactions with the police force. Now, that's at a time, you know, in the 70s, there were a lot of problems in Texas with police and especially minority groups. In the 70s, I mean, just here in town, you know, you had Jose Campos Torres, who was a prime example. You had a few years before that, a kid up in Dallas, a little 12-year-old, two police interrogating him, shoots them in the head in the car. and then you get these stories, and so people have some very negative impressions of police. And I think one of the things that you had said, it's about communication and it's about building that relationship. How do we go back to this idea of we're working together and get trust back in the police?
Well, first of all, and you brought up, and I'm glad you did, because I always do if I'm meeting a group, and especially children or a community of color. Let's be true about it. Law enforcement has a dirty, ugly history dealing with people of color and poor people in certain areas. So you have to acknowledge that and let people know that's where we are. That's where we were, I meant to say, but where are we now? And we still have problems. And when you talk to especially a younger crowd, young men and young women, teenagers and young adults, they're very smart, and you have to be very honest with them. Don't come in there, trying to make excuses or whatnot and all this peaches and creams, because it's not. You need to paint a realistic picture and a true picture, and the true picture is what I said. Most officers are doing a great job. Most officers, and you mentioned, and I don't watch much TV other than the news, but by the time I get home, I'm burnt, But a lot of stuff of what you see on TV is that's what it is. It's TV. It's not realistic. Most individuals don't realize that most police officers never shoot anyone in a 30, 35, 25-year career. They never shoot anyone. But if you looked at TV or you look at some of the stuff that's on social media, we all out here shooting a lot of people. Now, there is problems, with police in certain communities, and we got to work on that. You got to try to sit down with people and talk to them and recognize people have different experiences in their life. With family members or dealing with the police officer themselves, and you have to make room. You have to let a person know, look, what you think and your perception and what you believe, it's important, okay? Your reality is your reality. Your perceptions are your perceptions, mine are mine, but let's sit down and have some honest, frank conversation and try to get to a point where we can build some bridges, and that's what it's about to me.
We see on TV this, what do they call it, the thin blue line, that if one officer does something, well, they're all going to back him up, they're all going to back her up, and it's going to get swept into the rug. And I see this on social media, but it seems like you guys are saying something different, that's Hollywood again.
It's people talk in terms of police culture, and when you talk in terms of police culture, what are you saying? And let me use my agency. We're an agency of almost 5,200 sworn police officers and another 1,000 of our support, our great civilian employees. So you have all kind of different subgroups within that police department. So you hear people say, oh, all those police officers, they're going to think alike and they're going to talk alike and all. That's just not true. But I wanted to just go back just a little bit because this is so important. As police officers, we know what we can go, an agency can go 20 years with no major incident, and one officer just messes it up for everybody, does something so egregious and so stupid that it messes up everything nationwide. So it is very important and incumbent upon us as police officers, as a profession, to make sure that we're policing ourselves and also those men and women around us with badges. It's terribly important that police administrators set the standards, set high standards, and hold people accountable. A lot of times when you have agencies that have systemic issues, racism or corruption or whatnot, you're going to find that they had leaders that didn't hold people accountable, that turned their heads when certain things were going on. So it's really incumbent on us to police ourselves. I know at least 75%, it may be 77%. I checked the exact number of all our IED complaints are driven from within officers, reporting and misconduct or other administrative wrongdoing. So,
Right.
Yeah.
One of the biggest topics there is in ethics is racism. So What do you guys have to say about the police who are fired for saying a racist statement in social media?
I think there were some people in Dallas that
Right.
this happened to.
Well, are you talking about Philadelphia as well?
Right.
I forgot the group that went out and looked at, but it was what the lieutenant was saying. You are a police officer 24/7, okay? And a lot of those people thought that, you know what, I'm off duty, I have my First Amendment rights. You do. But you don't have a First Amendment right to be a police officer and employed with a major organization or a smaller organization. So you have to watch what you say and watch what's in your heart and try to, and we'll go a little deeper right now to the spirit. Mm-hmm. If you cleanse your heart and you try to work with people and you try to understand, and it's very simple, just love people, okay? When you're doing that, that won't be something that's going to be spilling out of your mouth, okay? But if you're a person that show up and you put on your uniform and you put on a face and then you go home or you get with your group of friends and you put on another racist face or whatever that is, you prejudge it, it's going to come out. And there's absolutely no place for that because we have to serve everybody. This is one of the most powerful jobs based upon just the mere authority we have to arrest, use deadly force. We can disrupt or end somebody's life. So you know what? We really need to police ourselves and what we're putting on social media, what comes out your mouth. Now, sometimes I understand that people may you get in a stressful situation and you may say something and you want to take it back. But my mom and my dad always said this one thing. You know what? Once something come out your mouth, you can't take it back. So I always try to take that. And I know I'm human just like anybody else. And I'm not going to go and say that I've never said anything wrong. We all have made some mistakes. But right now, and especially in this dirty environment, and I don't talk politics too much, but all around, you have people on whatever side you are saying just dirty, mean things about people they don't even know. And it makes absolutely no sense because we're one nation and we really need to come together. And in policing, we're one big profession. I don't care what agency you work for or wherever you are, you're one profession. And if you're not dedicated and loyal to the profession, you're in the wrong profession. So
That's right.
I want to thank my guests this evening. We had Elizabeth Doss, Assistant Chief Deputy of Operations for the Tax Assessor-Collector's office here in Houston. That's the office of Ann Harris Bennett. And we want to congratulate and welcome incoming HPD Chief Troy Fenner. And we went back to the show from 2019 where he joined us as a guest. And we thank you. Thank you for joining us this evening. And we hope that you have a good month. We'll see you again next month with more Public Affairs, Public Access on Houston MediaSource TV. I'm Gene Preuss with the League of Women Voters of Houston. Have a good night.